or liberalism. The scholars, after thorough research, have concluded that the liberalism as a political ideology is not the outgrowth of the 20th century intellectual progress. Its origin can be traced to the political ideas of the 14th century. During the last 6 centuries, the concept had to face several situations and had to overcome uphill tasks in the sense that many political systems, individuals, and organizations stridently opposed it on various grounds, some of which had solid foundations. The flood-like appearance of Marx and Engel's work and Martian's literatures eclipsed through temporarily. The growth and influence of liberalism, the establishment of Bolshevik government in Russia in 1970, kindled the hope in the minds of anti-liberals that with the weapon of Marxism, the rapid advance of liberalism could be stopped, and particularly an anti-liberal atmosphere could be built up in the third world states. So at first, Moscow and later on Beijing opposed this liberalism and they opposed it by tooth and nail. Ultimately, the academic and political world were deeply plunged into the conflict between two leading ideologies of the world, liberalism and socialism. The recession of the Cold War in the mid-70s and finally the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 turned the condition of liberalism upside down. It was being felt that only liberalism could provide solace to all people of the world, solving the basic problems, both economic and political. If we talk about the meaning with regard to the definition and origin, the word liberal is derived from the Latin word liber, which means free man. Liber का मतलब होता है जो इंसान free हो. Liberalis is also a derivative of liber. एक liberal इंसान का ही synonym में ये word है liberalis. The central idea of all these words is freedom or liberty. सेंटर फोकस क्या है इन सब का कि फ्रीडम होना चाहिए और लिबर्टी होनी चाहिए. फ्रीडम ऑफ लिबर्टी दोनों सिनोनिमस टर्म्स हैं जिनका मतलब एक ही है. Liberal also denotes generosity or open-mindedness. Liberal word open-mindedness को भी include करता है, like taking in food, drink, social attitude, behavior, and selection of the alternatives. So we can find that freedom is always associated with the word liberal. जहाँ liberal है वहाँ freedom. In the Middle Ages, when the French people used the word liber, they meant that people will have freedom in respect of their selection of alternatives and pursuits of thoughts and ideas. So, जब फ्रेंच पीपल इस वर्ड को यूज करते तो उनको लगता था कि उनके पास अधिकार है अपने विचारों को रखने का और अपनी मर्जी से चॉइस करने का. So it means the belief that it is the aim of politics to preserve individual rights and to maximize freedom of choice. So politics का एक ही aim होता है कि individual rights को और बढ़ावा दिया जाए और freedom of choice को maximize किया जाए. So advocates of liberalism have used some selected words to note the meaning of liberalism. Freedom and choice. The freedom to select alternatives which are suitable. Choice making power जो होता है हम अपनी इच्छा से जो selection करते हैं, that is one of the aspect. Liberalism is a systematic political creed. It is the manifestation of reason and tolerance in the face of tradition and absolutism. Freedom and equality with liberty are embodied in the liberalism. So as an adjective, liberal implies an attitude of mind rather than a political creed. But the noun liberalism designates a political creed, and this was used specifically in the early parts of the 19th century. Robert Ickell, in his noted article Liberalism, has stated that liberalism, in ultimate analysis, is a political ideology, intimately associated with the birth and evolution of the capitalist world. So we can say that as a political ideology, liberalism means to pursue policies of freedom in political and economic spheres and even clear restrictions on the activities of the state authority. Even liberalism does not embody a particular meaning. It is a cluster of meanings. In different periods, it has meant different conception. For example, it is an intellectual movement whose purpose is to curb the power and authority of state and to ensure freedom of individuals. It has been observed by a recent analyst that liberalism is an ideology based on a commitment to individualism, freedom, toleration, and consent. Hence, we can say that in modern sense, liberalism are both an ideology and a movement, whose purpose is to strengthen the cause and progress of individual through the vindication of right to select the choicest alternative and for that purpose to endorse the restriction upon the authority of state. Liberalism, strictly speaking, is an offshoot of capitalism, since it was believed that the meteoric growth of capitalism could be possible only through an adoption of liberal policies, which contains an allowance of maximum freedom to investors and producers. So we can say that liberalism is an economic and political doctrine. Let's have a look how this concept of liberalism rose and the growth took place. So it is really an uphill task to ascertain the origin of liberalism, क्योंकि an ideology can't be created at a particular point of time. However, it's quite safe to say that liberalism was born in England during the middle of 17th century. Here again, the readers may be cautioned that the seeds of liberalism existed in British society even before England. So nevertheless, we can say that several factors and writings of a number of persons contributed to the origin of this political ideology called liberalism. First one was the collapse of feudalism is an important cause of the origin of liberalism. So let me explain it briefly. In a feudal period, feudal lords practically controlled the economy and politics along with the church, and its fall opened the advent of capitalism and emergence of a middle class which aspired to have a positive role in politics. The capitalist class and the middle class did not want the dominant role of the church. So the capitalists supplied the finance for the management of state and middle class supplied executives and administrators. Slowly but steadily, these two classes captured the power of the state and wanted to impose restrictions upon the government. In this way, there were liberalism arose in embryonic form. Second major reason was Ickshall. In his article, Liberalism maintains that enlightenment is another factor of the growth of liberalism. So the thinkers and philosophers of this enlightenment period were skeptical about the role of laws, administration, and custom. They strongly advocated for the rational reconstruction of society so that the individual can get enough freedom. Autocratic rule or dictatorial administration were vehemently opposed at that point of time. Third major reason was two major events of the second half of the 18th century helped the emergence of liberalism. These two events were Declaration of American Independence in 1776 and the Declaration of the Rights of Men in 1789. Both these events furthered the progress of liberalism. American War of Independence was not simply a war of the independence of a particular nation, but a major war against colonialism, which contained the seed of liberalism. On the other hand, after the French Revolution, Declaration of the Rights of Men heralded the collapse of autocratic rule in France, and its waves spread to other parts of Europe, and this accelerated the advent of liberalism. The writings, including philosophy of some men, were conspicuous in advancing the emergence of liberalism. Some of them may be stated briefly, like John Gray says that Thomas Hobbes may be regarded as an exponent of liberalism. Hobbes' period was from 1588 to 1679. Closeness to liberalism lies in part in his uncompromising individualism. It is found also in his egalitarian affirmation of the equal liberty of all men, the state of nature, and his rejection of a purely hereditary title to political authority. Benedict Spenzona, whose period was 1632 to 1677, was also a procurer of liberalism or follower of liberalism. He was mainly concerned with natural rights, freedom, curtailment of political power, and maintenance of peace and security. So behind the birth of liberalism, there was a very important role of John Locke, whose period was 1632 to 1704. Locke, by many, is regarded as the father of modern nationalism. His two treatises of government, a letter concerning toleration, are regarded by many as potential source of liberalism. Gray says that Locke's thought harbors a number of themes which confer a distinctive complexion on English liberalism that persist up to the time of John Stuart Mill. His theory of natural right, right to property, concept of consent, constitutionalism, people's right to dislodge a government for its future to act in accordance with the terms and conditions of contract, a classic example of liberal thought. The major ideas of liberalism enunciated by Locke, carried out by many who belong to the later part of the 18th century and early years of 19th century. To be briefly, Locke vigorously championed the central themes of liberalism. Tom Paine, from 1737 to 1809, was another figure whose thought symbolizes the idea and spirit of liberalism. Paine strongly advocated for natural rights and limited government, which later on became the focus of liberal thought and philosophy. His limited government is nothing but minimum government or state, which has been elaborated by Robert Nozick. J.S. Mill and several other political scientists thought that people's liberty, rights and other interests could only be assumed through the constitutionalism, representative government and constitutional declaration of human rights. So if you are supposed to categorize the development growth of liberalism, then first one reason was the collapse of feudalism, second was the article by Ixchel, and third one was the two major event, Declaration of American Independence and Declaration of Rights of Men in 1789. Fourth one were the writings of notable authors which all contributed to the growth of liberalism. So another important core value or principle or element of liberalism is freedom. To the liberals, it is the value of supreme importance because without it, the individuals will simply gonna remain a unit without any kind of dignity. Moreover, liberty or freedom is the best vehicle for development of best qualities. But the liberals do not advocate for absolute or unrestricted freedom because freedom or liberty will do more harm. They are in favor of chained or restricted liberty. John Stuart Mill from 1806 to 1873 was the pioneer of individual liberty, but he favored the association of law with freedom because he believed that restriction is for the general welfare of the community. The famous British historian Asa Berlin, 1909 to 1997, developed a famous concept of liberty which states that liberty or freedom has two concepts, positive as well as negative, like every coin has two sides. So the negative liberty implies that men should be allowed to enjoy an atmosphere free from all sorts of restriction. This was the contention of classical thinkers, but modern liberals do not think of liberty where there shall be no restriction. It is positive liberty because the real liberty is one which implies laws and restriction. So positive liberty ये कहती है कि laws भी होने चाहिए, restriction भी होना चाहिए, freedom भी होना चाहिए और freedom restrict भी होना चाहिए जहाँ जरूरत हो. पर नेगेटिव लिबर्टी ये कहती है कि हर इंडिविजुअल के ऊपर कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए, उनके पास सिर्फ फ्रीडम ही होना चाहिए. थर्ड एलिमेंट इज रीजन. So liberalism harbors upon reason. To put in other words, liberalism and reason are inseparable from each other. जहाँ liberalism वहाँ reason होगा ही. Because liberalism का भी there is always a back reason. So this relationship can be viewed from more than one angle. First one is mention has been made earlier that liberalism partially is the product of enlightenment, which strongly emphasizes that man is rational, being and guided by reason and rationality. The advent of enlightenment emancipated men from age-old superstitions, ignorance, and bondage. Enlightenment also established the age of reason. So enlightenment is the one which established the age of reason. Second is this point that since individuals are rational and reasonable, they are quite capable of taking any decision and to judge what is good and what is bad for them. So in that case, there is no necessity of imposing any decision by any outside power or authority. The liberals believe that real progress of society could be achieved only through the individual's initiative, and outside interference will dampen the spirit of initiatives. Last point is the primacy of reason, ultimately led by Adam Smith from 1723 to 1790, to enunciate a doctrine of laissez-faire. A large number of philosophers and thinkers enriched the various aspects of enlightenment through their philosophy and ideas. Enlightenment in all possible ways gave priority to reason and rationality. Rationalism is the belief that the world has a rational structure and that this can be disclosed through the exercise of human reason and critical inquiry. Fourth element is toleration, sahanshilta. Toleration is another value or element of liberalism. In any society, there is found different opinions, religious sects, communities, or beliefs and faiths. India को ही देख लीजिए, lot of religious sects and communities, लाखों belief और faith है, हर व्यक्ति का अलग अलग है. All of them must live side by side peacefully, पर सब साथ में रहते हैं एक ही जगह पे. And for this there is a requirement of toleration. क्यों साथ में रहते हैं? Because there is toleration. Also, various ideologies and opinions make a society diverse. It is the basic feature of any society. Liberalism believes that all these diversities must exist side by side. One community or section has no right to impose its decision or belief of another. Only in authoritarian community, imposition of ideas and belief happens. On the other hand, liberalism attempts to accommodate all the beliefs, faiths, ideologies, and opinions. Lord Ramakrishnan very frequently said, many other opinions and many other ways. The noted French philosopher Voltaire, 1694 to 1778, once said that, I detest what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. So this opinion of Voltaire clearly shows that he forcefully advocated for the practice of toleration. Massacre of Saint Bartholomew in 1572 is the manifestation of the most hated type of intoleration. Not only this massacre, numerous other events took place in various parts of European society, and there were definitely block spots of society. What liberalism wants to impress upon us is that toleration ought to be practiced by all sections of body politics, and if it is not done, the progress will be adversely affected, which will be the loss for the whole community. The fifth element of liberalism is the consent. Consent is another value or element of liberalism. The idea of consent, though very old, its modern appearance took place in the hands of contractualists such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke. Both of them assertively urged that the members of the state of nature assembled together to take a decision about the setting up of a body politics, and behind this decision there was the consent of all. Locke dealt elaborately with consent, and this was one of the pillars of his liberalism. The freedom fighters of America raised their arms against the British rulers and said that they had no consent behind British rule in America. We hold the view that the consent is a very important element of any democratic government, and this has been variously explained by many in numerous forms. It is generally held that representative form of government is the most popular embodiment of consent. J.S. Mill was a great defender of government based on consent. The liberal thinkers even go a step ahead and declare that every law and policy must be based on consent of those for whom these are made. In this way, consent has become an integral part of democracy, and liberal political philosophers are of the opinion that all forms of pluralist society must start from below. That is, consent of all or majority must constitute the basic structure of society. Sixth element is constitutionalism, which is a very important value of liberalism. It has two meanings, narrow and broad. In its narrow meaning, constitutionalism means certain limitation upon the government specified by constitution. The narrow meaning further states that whenever a government intends to discharge any function or adopt a policy, it must follow the restriction. In broader sense, it implies values, principles, and ideas which act as guide to the government. Whenever the government proceeds to some work, it must implement these values, principles, ideas. The objective is to give proper credence to the aspiration of the people and to translate them into reality. Constitutionalism is a basic principle of liberalism. In its simple language, which states that government business never specifies that it has the unlimited freedom to do anything without considering the advantage or disadvantage of the common people. It must follow certain basic rules and procedures laid down in the basic or ordinary laws. Needless to say that this idea was first formulated by Locke and the later period it was adhered to by many. This is called constitutionalism or liberalism. It can further state that constitutional principle must be observed by both and the rulers and the ruled, and none has the authority to act arbitrarily. The arbitrariness and the constitutionalism are the issues situated at two opposite poles. Constitutionalism is the another name of limited government or the theory of limited state. Next one, liberalism is based on another principle and that is equality. Though we treat it as a political principle, value, it is also a religious and moral principle. Because religious minded people generally say that every person is born equal, as Ross said. Man is born free. So it is an unreligious to deprive him of his equal status with others. The religious people also believe that it is never the intention of God to create inequalities among men. And if an artificial distinction is created among men, that will go against the will of God. And in that sense, it is immoral. So, it is observed that as a political ideology, liberalism has also built up a nexus with religion. But liberalism is also an ideology of practical world. In any society, all the individuals can't claim same levels of merit, intelligence, and capacity of hard work. And in that case, there must arise clear differences in remuneration. This must be admitted, and hard work can't be equally remunerated. And if done so, that will make way of appearances of gross injustice. None will be ready to demonstrate his ability. This type of social inequality does not infringe upon the concept of equality. Equality as a principle in political science asserts that none will be allowed to enjoy special privilege, ignoring the common minimum privileges to which everyone has legitimate claims. Last element is justice. Though justice is the principle of both socialism and liberalism, the latter gives it more importance and politically declares that the very basis of liberalism is justice. The liberal justice has several forms and meanings. To note a few, it is declared policy of liberalism that each individual will have his due share, and since all men are born equal, none can be deprived any other of their share. All the persons have same status in society, and there shall be an atmosphere so that people can enjoy the status. Liberals furiously disapprove of any social privilege or advantage that are enjoyed by some but denied by the others, of the basic factors such as gender, race, color, creed, religion, or social background. Rights should not be reserved for any particular class of person. The most important form of equality are legal equality and political equality. A liberal conception of justice further draws our attention to the point that the door of opportunity shall be open to all. Everyone will get the chance to have a share of opportunity. Liberalism also speaks of social equality. All these interpretations lead to the liberal conception of justice. It also says that talented and non-talented people are not to be grouped together. In this political ideology, there is a special place of talent, which means that the merit should be recognized and should be given due share. It is called meritocracy also. So these all are the elements of liberalism: justice, equality, constitutionalism, consent, toleration, reason, freedom, and individualism.